Hello, and welcome to Chapter 6, which I'm being forced to read by two people, one in Australia and one in the Netherlands? Denmark, because it's 2 o'clock at night, but they really want me to read. So, this is Chapter 6, The Lone Wolf. The staircase, unlike the chamber above, was quite small, only descending about 3 stories. At the bottom, reflected by my torchlight, was a solid ornamental door, inscribed with intricate carvings inlaid with gold. A large image of Discord, stunningly crafted, took up the center, and along the borders were a great multitude of ponies, who seemed to be bowing to him in worship. Daring wisely suggested that we take a breather before continuing on. We'd been traveling for quite some time now, and with the next area of the temple clearly within reach, we decided to hunker down for the night on the staircase, and pressed onward some time after some shut-eye. She curled up on the ground a few steps higher than I was, and soon fell asleep, tucking her head into her wings like a bird. I didn't feel tired at the time, so I decided to work on the equestrian language some more. I dug into my backpack and retrieved my binder, which by this time had been filled to 3/4 full. Stuffing my pack behind me, I leaned up against the wall and began to work in the faint torchlight. As I continued my self-education, I couldn't help but think about the history of this place. One morning I'd found her poring over some sketch of the temple, a large amount of notes laying nearby. I tried to make sense of it, but at the time I was barely able to read individual words, let alone Daring's atrocious chicken scratch wing writing. And yes, she held her writing utensil with the ending feathers of her wings, though sometimes switched to her mouth. She noticed my curiosity, and filled me in on everything she knew about the site and our current adventure. Long, long ago, Discord used to rule Equestria. Or actually, he didn't really rule it. He was just the absolute authority in the land, when the mood struck him. He would spend most of his free time simply frolicking about, pranking ponies left and right. Chaos was king, and while Discord never did any real harm to his subjects, outside of the occasional lightning bolt or pie to the face, they were very unhappy. Discord was never one for modesty, and constantly flaunted his power, raining prosperity on the land one day, and the next he turned the oceans into hot sauce. Basically, it was like someone had given a 6-year-old the keys to the Death Star and said, "Have fun!" Discord was not a god. That much I knew for sure. From what I knew about them, a god would know all and be able to do all. Discord was not all-knowing, nor was he all-powerful. If he was either of those things, then he'd never have been defeated by Celestia or Luna, and later by the bearers of the elements of harmony. However, the ponies who were loyal to him, there were a decent number of them, would worship him as a deity in places much like the Temple of Chaos. Once there had been many temples like this, scattered across Equestria, but after his defeat, most of his shrines were destroyed. It seemed that this one had escaped the wrath of the princesses, probably due to its extreme distance from, well, anything. Daring Do, the undisputed master of adventuring, had been trying to crack this place open for years. She didn't know what was inside. Hell, no pony knew it was. The secrets of Discord worship had been struck down along with the Draconicus himself. That was what made this place so alluring to her, I suspected. Most of the time she had a general idea of what she'd find in the ruins she so frequently explored. A magical idol, perhaps, or a treasure room filled with priceless scrolls. But here, no. Neither of us knew what to expect. Riches? Knowledge? Frankly, I'm not sure it mattered to either of us. Daring was always chomping at the bit for something like this. A true dive into the unknown. Exactly what explorers do. That was her special talent. Going where no pony had gone before, and it was obvious as the mark on her ass. Me? Well, I wanted answers. Why was I here? Why was Discord on Earth? Aside from that, I really only wanted to do this because it was here to do. In short, why the hell not? It's not like I had anything better to do. I think Discord must have put a little too much chaotic energy into that kick, because I was beginning to sound like him. There was no night or day down here, and I only had the light of the torch to see by. Minecraft. After about an hour of work, I took some firewood out of Daring's saddlebags and made a small campfire to keep the light going. Then I slept. Several outer hours later, Hey, wake up, lazy. It's time to get this thing open. I woke up to the feeling of a hoof prodding me in the stomach. I groaned and stood up, stretching and cracking my joints. Another habit I'd developed. You see, the larger the joint you crack, the louder the noise it makes. My knuckles were now the size of my knees, and made incredibly satisfying pops, about as loud as a cap gun. Daring stood by the door, examining it closely. It should swing open just fine, but it'll take a bit of effort. Come here and push it with me. I strolled over and leaned my shoulder into the door, and pushed off the stairs as best as I could. Daring added in. Her head pressed hard into the surface, while her wings pumped down and up, creating a soft draft that almost blew out the torch. After a considerable amount of groaning and heaving, the door slowly inched open, swinging upwards on a hinge attached to the ceiling, like a hatch. I pushed it up and held it high, while she gathered our supplies and extinguished the campfire. You'd think that holding a heavy door above your head would be tiresome, but my strong arms took the burden well. After she came through, I let the door go, and it swung back into place with a tremendous crash. Echo! This is it! Those words, shattering the tomb-like silence out of this place, made my ears perk up with interest as I surveyed the room we were now in. From the torchlight, I could see a long walkway extending into the center of the vast vaulted chamber, where it met with a stepped circular platform. A cylindrical capsule lay on a table on the platform's summit, but nothing else. The darkness from the first room was here as well, although we could faintly see the walls and the ceiling. But down! I gently pried a splinter off the torch and lit the end, before dropping it off the walkway. We watched as the bright speck silently plummeted through the blackness for a long, long time. We didn't move, and we didn't breathe. Our eyes were riveted to the rapidly fading glimmer with a frightening intensity. And then, for a split second, something moved over the light. Something big. Daring Do gasped. By Celestia's mane! We weren't alone. I remembered a saying from Earth. I don't know where it's from, but it applied to the situation perfectly. If you stare long enough into the abyss stares back. I suddenly experienced the unbidden feeling of my hackles rising until they were so stiff that they actually pushed my backpack off me a little. My fur fluffed out too, and felt a bit like goosebumps. I turned to Daring. Move fast. This place was sealed for a reason. She nodded silently. The feathers on her wings puffed out, not unlike my fur. Tearing her gaze from the yawning void, she began to trot down the hallway to the platform. Her hooves made a weird echoing throughout the chamber, while I padded softly behind, warily glancing around. We climbed up the platform's circular steps and beheld the strange item on the altar. It was made of dark stone, just like everything else, but it was very smooth, and there were faint circles inscribed onto it. It looked organic, although almost like a giant, 3-foot-tall egg. Daring gently ran a wingtip over the surface and frowned. It's warm. Echo, you gotta feel this. I gingerly extended a paw and pressed my palm onto the stone. Sure enough, it was warm, and it almost felt like the heat was pulsing a little. I reached my paw back and delicately poked it with a claw. It made a strange, haunting note, like running your finger along the edge of a wineglass. We exchanged a glance. Whatever it was, this was what we came for, and it was coming back with us. I reached out again and wrapped it in my paws, picking it up with surprising ease. It almost felt hollow, and yet it seemed to move around as if there was something inside it. I twisted it around in my paws, examining it from every angle. Were those words on the bottom? Ah, if it isn't Miss Daring Do and her flea-bitten mongrel. I'd say it's a pleasure to see you two again, but really, it isn't. The words came from behind, startling me so badly that my claws extended, sinking into the orb with an almost frightening ease. A faint purple-pink glow began to shine from where my claws had punctured it, and I felt it began to grow hot on my skin. I glanced behind me, but kept facing the altar, now much more frightened than before. Aizo stood on the walkway, his large blue figure flickering weirdly in the torchlight. "What do you want?" Daring spat at him, although quietly, unwilling to break the uneasy stillness of the chamber. "Why, the exact same thing you do. Fame, fortune, and to have a good time while acquiring it, of course. Oh, and that interesting little treasure your pet seems to have picked up? Yes, I think that will do nicely." He grinned, revealing row after row of serrated shark-like teeth. "And if you could die in the process, that would just make my day." Well, fuck berries. He must have been following us the entire time, just waiting for us to get to the end so he could snatch away our prize. Speaking of which, the object in my grip is beginning to heat up even more. The light spilling from the hairline cracks that were now forming had increased in intensity. I felt it began to shake a little. Still, I kept my back turned to Aizo. Whatever this thing was, it was my ace in the hole, so he didn't know what it was doing this. Daring responded by reaching into her saddlebags to withdraw a long, thick whip, which she cracked expertly over her head while gripping it tightly in her teeth. The loud snap sounded more like a sonic boom of the jet in the weird acoustics of this chamber. Aizo hissed at her like a cat, before letting his claws slide out, and he charged up the walkway. Daring flicked her whip down at him, before taking off with a powerful pump of her wings. She soared through the air in silent, graceful flight, circling her foe on the walkway. Aizo, fixated on her, warily held himself at the ready where he stood, tensed to leap away at a second's notice. The orb got hotter, brighter, and more energetic. I crouched by the altar, hiding it from view. My claws, which I'd withdrawn from the orb, were now glowing as well, as if covered in neon paint at a rave party. Then she struck. A sudden burst of speed, followed by the faint whistling of the whip before it snapped again, this time on Aizo's backside, despite his best efforts at evading. He screeched in pain and slashed out at her, barely missing a passing foreleg. His cry bounced off the walls, reverberating in my ears and making me lay them flat against my head. They circled each other again, before Daring struck a second time, buzzing her foe like a dive bomber. He ducked and rolled to the side, almost falling off the walkway, his tail lashing in anger. A third strike soon followed, and this time both combatants scored a hit, Daring's whip striking across the face, and one of Aizo's claws tracing an almost delicate slice on her side, just under the wing. They continued to fight like this, a charge, a sudden exchange of blows, and then a quick retreat. This was suicide, I realized. Daring simply didn't have anything able to take him out in one blow, and eventually she would tire, forcing her to land and allowing him to bring his superior size into play. I was the only one who could even fight him, but even then I doubted I'd be able to do much, given our last encounter. Or could I? The object in my hand seemed ready to explode. Just maybe. Daring gave out a shriek as Aizo scored another hit, this one on the leading edge of her wing, and it was deep too. Dark blood dripped off her and into the abyss as she flew, although somewhat weaker now. I let out a high-pitched, two-tone whistle that I usually saved for getting people's attention, and the equivalent of yelling, "Hey, dumbass! Hey, dumbass! Over here!" It got his attention. The beast looked over at me, and I figured he'd almost forgotten I was here. I put the orb on the altar and turned around, pencil and paper in paw. "Guess my favorite ballet." He stopped, stunned. The look on his face was about as surprised as if I'd suddenly turned into a tiny masked wrestler and drop-kicked his grandmother off a cliff. "Excuse me?" "The Nutcracker!" And with that, I whipped around, picking up the pulsing object, and hurled it at him as hard as I could. He stared stupidly as it flew, before it impacted right on his crotch, and promptly exploded in a brilliant purple fireball, the concussion from the blast knocking Daring out of the air and onto the platform, where she came to rest at my paws. Aizo flew back to roll to a stop several yards away, but I didn't give him a chance to recover. Now free of my burden, I tore down the walkway and sank my glowing claws deep into him, before grunting as I lifted his smoky figure high over my head. "Give my best to Emperor Palpatine, bitch!" I whipped my arms downwards as fast as I could, and flung him into the void. He let out a sickening wail as he fell, spinning slowly through the blackness before fading from view. His cry pierced the silence of the room, and he even bothered to suck in another breath to continue his scream for another few seconds, before it suddenly ended. Daring slowly regaining her footing, wincing as she tried moving her wing around. It was bleeding heavily, but she shrugged off my advances with the first aid kit, instead gawking at the walkway. "What in Equestria is that?" she simply whispered, her jaw almost completely slack. I followed her gaze, and soon my jaws joined hers. A figure emerged from the smoke left by the explosion. It was about Daring's height, wry, and almost snake-like. It stood on two legs that seemed to be from an ostrich and the other a lion. A kangaroo tail extended far behind it. The body was thin, and scales ran up the front, while golden brown feathers flowed down the back. It had 4 arms, 2 of which looked like they were from a very large lobster, the other 2 from a bear, although with pure white fur. It had a purple, scaled head that faintly reminded me of one of those Chinese dragons, and it had a magnificent curled mustache that was streaked with green and pink and blue. It sauntered up to us, and crossed both pairs of arms before rolling its neck around, popping the vertebrae. "Oh, 2,000 years will give you such a crink in the neck! Ha ha! Aladdin! Gusta. All right, so which one of you set me loose?" We were still for a moment, and then I sheepishly pointed a glowing claw at myself. "Well, what have we here? You're an interesting specimen," it said, as it strutted around me, giving me an appraising look with 2 eyes, were surprisingly matching, a deep, regal magenta. "So, I assume you knew what you were doing when you set me loose." I shook my head as Daring did. Well then, I suppose I better introduce myself, then. Terrible manners to not do that sort of thing, you know." He snapped his fingers, and a business card popped into existence, and I caught it between thumb and forefinger. "My name is Disarray, and you, my interesting furry friend, have just won this fabulous prize!" He spun backwards and spread his arms as an old-timey flashing billboard suddenly lit above him. "3 favors from moi." What the hell is this? You see, I got into a bit of a fight with my old man, and he put me in that dreadful egg thing for a time out. 2,000 years later, here I am. He leaves me in there, so I vowed to really stick it to him by granting my rescuer a few requests. Of course, there are a few rules. No asking for me to make things back to life. I can actually do that, but it's really nasty, and zombies are never a good thing to have on one's platter. Second, I'm not a matchmaker, so don't bother wishing for love. Third, no tricking me into giving you a freebie. I'm a lot smarter than you think. Fourth, no making compound favors. You can't ask for 2 things at the same time. Well then, let's hear it. Daring and I exchanged a glance. "This is up to you, Echo. I've already got everything I want." I bet he'll regret not wishing for speech, whatever it is. Whatever he does wish. I thought for a while. Disarray and Daring both eagerly peering at me. What did I want? I could have pretty much anything my twisted little mind could think of, and this guy seemed quite capable to provide me with just that. "Take us to the entrance of the temple." He simply looked at it before taking the paper and crumpling it up and tossing it over the edge. He sighed. "You have to say what you want, Fuzzy." Daring gave the abyss a fearful glance. "He can't speak." "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" "No, I mean, he actually can't speak." He looked at me again, and I pointed to the fresh scar on my neck. His eyes widened suddenly in what seemed to be fear. "Oh my, that isn't good. I can't fix damage like that. Tell you what, if I give you a new way to talk, will you count that as my second favor?" "Oh. That's interesting." I nodded vigorously. Wait, second favor? What was the first favor? Whatever. I nodded vigorously. The sound of the roaring was beginning to draw closer. The patchwork creature adopted some kind of kung fu pose and gestured forward with his pair of lobster claws, which began to glow purple-pink. "Shazam!" he cried. The lights flashed. I blinked stupidly for a few seconds and tried to say something. I was met with only pain, as the shreds of my vocal cords protested mightily. I glared at him. Disarray shrugged. What? I never said I'd give you your voice back. I just gave you a new way to talk. Try it out! He lifted up my paws and tapped the center of my palms. The claws shot out, not glowing much more brightly than before. He moved my hands up and down, and the claws left a shining contrail behind them. I was mesmerized. It was like I was riding in air. I pulled away and quickly repeated my demand. I watched and watched in awe as the words hung there in space for a while, their light tinging my vision with its luminescence. There was a snapping sound, and suddenly we were standing on top of the temple. The night sky stretched out before us in a glorious ceiling of stars. The moon hung low in the sky, merely a hairline crescent. The jungle was still as vibrant as ever, even at night, and the fresh barrage of sound after the eerie quiet of the temple felt like music to my ears. Daring looked around in disbelief, clearly as surprised as I was. "What the hey? You said he had to talk to get that thing to work." Disarray nodded. "You did talk. See, the Sea Explorer, the pup's claws were already covered in my essence. I added a little more, and, well, you saw the result. The act of putting words in the air is speaking, or rather, this is the highest form of it. I did exactly as I said I would do, no more, no less. Oh, and by the way, you've got one favor left, so you can just..." A pair of sunglasses appeared on his face. "Deal with it." The mayor sank. This is a good author. This is a good author. The mare sank to the ground in silence. I noticed she was still bleeding, so I finally began applying some of the healing salve to the wound. She didn't resist. "So what'll it be? Power? Woman? A bouncy house? Please say a bouncy house! There's so much fun!" I turned from Daring to see him lounging on the edge of the container I'd woken up in, nonchalantly clacking his lobster claws. He seemed very smug at that moment. "Anything?" I wrote in the air. My God, this was entrancing to look at. He picked his teeth with one of his bare paws. "Outside from what I've already restricted. Were you even listening?" I gave him a savage grin. Oh, I was listening all right. He fell for the biggest loophole in the book. "I want 3 more favors." Didn't he already say you couldn't do that? That was the 4th rule, right? He laughed heartily at this, and almost fell back down in the temple from his perch on the lip. "Huh! That's rich. You very well know that that's completely against..." He paused and frowned, suddenly worried. "Oh, well played, sir. Well played. You're about as devious as my old man. Let me tell you that. Fine. But from now on, no more of that. Now speak your heart's desire." "What?" I cracked my knuckles and began to write, my words carving through the night air in delicate ribbons of light, hovering in a spectacular light show. Disarray coolly read my demands. "It's not a bouncy house, but I guess it will do. Echo, first of all, I'd like to say that you are without a doubt the strangest creature I've ever come across. You don't act, think, speak, or even smell like other diamond dogs. The fact that you can even read and write is astounding enough, but looking out for daring as well, you are truly interesting. So interesting, I think I'll be watching you from now on. Now then, the first item on the list. You want to know why my father sent you here." "His father? Discord was his dad?" Of course, this guy's a Draconicus. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean he's the dad. Whatever. Now that I'd not seen coming. But who was his mother? Disarray's soft pink eyes glimmered in the moonlight. The snow-white fur on his second pair of arms had an almost pallid sheen to them. His mustache, streaked pink, blue, and green, seemed to shift a little, although there was no wind. Then it hit me harder than hangovers after New Year's. Holy shit. There was only one pony in Equestria who had something like that. That could only mean this guy was a prince. End of chapter 6? What? Wait. Oh. Okay. The mother is Princess Celestia. Pink, blue, green. That is definitely Princess Celestia's colors. Pink, blue, and green. Pink, blue, green. Pink, blue, green. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. I'm not reading 'cause the chapter has ended. But I'm singing, but I'm singing, but I'm singing. Because I am. Oh, speaking of that, here's another something with something or other. I don't know. Shut up. Shut up! I don't like you! You're not my friend! Okay, bye.